Hi there folks, Graham here. Welcome to the channel. Today we're talking about the dark art of MIDI. If you like what you see, then please don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell for future content. But for now, let's get started. This then is the studio, but what have we got and how is it all connected? Well, to start with, over on the desk we've got the Arturia KEYSTEP37. This little MIDI keyboard effectively acts as a master controller for the studio, and I can control all the other hardware from it. I've then got a Roland System 1, a Roland TR8 drum machine, the Roland TB3 bassline, the Yamaha MOX6, an Arturia Matrix Brute, Behringer Neutron and Behringer DeepMind 12. I then also have 4 other MIDI devices, the Spark LE drum machine, Keylab 61, Roly Seaboard 49 and Nectar Impact LX88 Plus MIDI keyboard, but these are effectively all just linked to the PC and configured to drive various VSTs. So how are they all connected? Well, one little trick is we have a MIDI Solutions Quadra through, you'll see that on the camera, which has 1 MIDI in and then 4 MIDI through ports coming out the back of it. You can see this on my screen. I'll just show you down here. And effectively what we've got is we've got the MIDI out from the KEYSTEP37 goes into the MIDI in on the Quadra through box. And then from the 4 Quadra through ports, we've then got a MIDI cable running out to the TR8 drum machine, the Yamaha MOX, the Matrix Brute and the DeepMind 12. So that takes care of those 4 through ports. We then have the Behringer Neutron is daisy chained off of the Arturia Matrix Brute using the through port from the Matrix Brute to run into the MIDI in on the Behringer Neutron. And then we also have the System 1 and TB3 daisy chained from the TR8 drum machine with the out from the Roland 8 running into the TB3 and then the out from the TB3 running into the Roland System 1. An important one here is that in all the daisy chaining we're using through ports rather than MIDI out. So as I said earlier, the Behringer Neutron is running from the through port on the Matrix Brute, not the out port. And on the TR8 drum machine and the TB3 I've configured the MIDI out to act as a MIDI through, which is functionality that they have. And this really helps with setting up the system because effectively the MIDI messages from the KEYSTEP are then passing, for example, through the Matrix Brute to the Neutron rather than the Matrix Brute itself triggering the Neutron, and the same with the Roland gear, rather than the drum machine triggering the TB3 and the System 1. It's the KEYSTEP at the start of the chain because the MIDI messages are just being passed through. The next piece of the puzzle is then setting the MIDI channels on each of the hardware instruments that we want the KEYSTEP37 to talk to. On the screen you can see a diagram here showing the MIDI connections that we just talked through a moment ago, with the KEYSTEP37 running through the MIDI Solutions Quadra through box into all of the other pieces of kit. You'll also then see the channel settings that I have for each piece of hardware. So for example, we have the Roland System 1 set on channel 1, the TB3 set to channel 2, the MOX6 set to channel 3, the Matrix Brute set to channel 4, the Neutron set to channel 5, the DeepMind set to channel 6, and the TR8 drum machine finally set to channel 10. The only reason that's at channel 10 rather than you might have thought it would be channel 7 is because that's the default setting and I couldn't be bothered to change the MIDI channel on it. The main reason for having all of these on separate MIDI channels is so that they can all be talked to individually rather than all at once. On the KEYSTEP37 there is a wonderful little feature where very quickly you can swap and change the MIDI channel that the KEYSTEP37 is transmitting on and therefore which keyboard it's talking to. So effectively, if I have the KEYSTEP set on channel 1, when I press a key on the KEYSTEP it will sound the Roland System 1. If I then change the MIDI setting to channel 4 it'll sound the Matrix Brute, or if I change it to channel 6 it'll sound the DeepMind 12, etc. So what does this setup mean I can do? Well, here's a quick demonstration. Here I have my KEYSTEP37, which, as we've mentioned, is connected to all the other hardware in my studio through various MIDI connections. Now, it has a great little piece of functionality that if I press the shift button here, you'll see this little blue light lights up, which says I'm on MIDI channel 1. If I press the next black key, it moves to MIDI channel 2, MIDI channel 3, MIDI channel 4, and so on. So I've put it on MIDI channel 1, which, as we know from the diagram earlier, is connected to our Roland System 1, and we play a little bit. So that's the System 1 being sounded. If I move it to channel 2, without making any other adjustments to my connections, I've now got the TB3 bassline machine coming through. If I move to number 3, I've got my Yamaha MOX6, which is on a piano at the moment. So we've got some piano coming through there. If I move to channel 4, we've then got the Matrix Brute synthesizer. And if we move to channel 5, we've got the Behringer Neutron. And if we move to channel 6, we've got the Behringer DeepMind 12. And if we really wanted to, we could put it on channel 10. Yep, we're on channel 10. Move the octaves down a little bit, and we could even play the TR8 drum machine. The great other thing about this setup is that I can then use the built-in ARP and sequencer on the KEYSTEP37 to drive my other hardware synths. So for example, I'm in ARP mode at the moment, and if I put it on channel 6, which is the DeepMind 12, and then I arm that, when I do, it'll trigger the drum machine, and I can also then play an ARP from the DeepMind 12. Stop that. So that's the arpeggiator in the KEYSTEP37 triggering the DeepMind 12. It has its own arpeggiator, but if I want to, I can use this. If I then go to the sequencer, because not all my synthesizers have built-in sequencers, in actual fact not many hardware synthesizers do, you can use the fantastic sequencer that's set up within the KEYSTEP37. So again, I'm on channel 6, little blue light for the DeepMind. I'm in sequencer mode, and if I now record a short little sequence, that's a little 16-step sequence, and if I play that back, again that's the DeepMind 12 being triggered by the sequencer from the KEYSTEP37. And if I now change MIDI channel on the fly, it's a great little tool that I can then move instruments on the fly. So we can move to the Neutron. So we've moved over to the Behringer Neutron. Move over to the System 1. And then move to, say, the piano on the Yamaha MOX. And then back to the DeepMind. Another little trick the KEYSTEP37 has up its sleeve is the ability with this MIDI setup to play 2 different MIDI channels at once. So at the moment I've got the KEYSTEP set to MIDI channel 6, which is highlighted in blue. If I press Shift and Octave and then say channel 4, then that means that I can play a melody using channel 4 over the top of the sequencer. So what you'll hear is the sequencer playing the DeepMind 12 and then me playing the Matrix Brute over the top of it. So we'll start the sequence. So that's the DeepMind 12 sounding, and and that's the matrix brute sounding over the top of it. So that's a really, really great little piece of functionality where you can play 2 MIDI instruments at once. Well, that's my MIDI setup. If you've got any questions, then please feel free to leave them in the comments section and I shall do my best to answer them. Or indeed, if you just want to leave a comment on what you thought of this video, then any feedback is very much appreciated. Also, if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell for future content. But for now, I've been Graham. Take care and catch you later.